Yeah, and you mentioned it. What the UFC has done and the way that Dana White has run everything. I know Jeremy's been he's turned into a UFC fan, even though he hasn't watched a lot of UFC in his life because specifically of the way that Dana has approached everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've watched some UFC, but I mean, I'm an old school wrestling fan, so I'll always watch my favorite wrestlers and typically get their ass beat. Shout out CM Punk. But yeah, I mean, it was those were some ugly fights, but but yeah, what Dana White has done and how he allows his fighters to have their own opinions, I think if the entire sports world ran like the UFC, we would be in much better shape right now. Much better shape, because I love that Dana allows his fighters to have whatever opinion they want, and then the fact that Dana continues to have his own individual opinions, because I think that's how the world should work, much less just sports. But we've seen so many problems with the sports industry, with the NBA and the NFL, with all of the nonsense, and Dana White just stays above that, continues to be a true leader. And it sets a great example for all of sports right now. And that's been such an attractive thing for me and so many other people, is to go, okay, I've never really followed UFC consistently, but the way Dana White runs it makes me want to support it even more, because he runs it the way it should be ran.
Yeah, I could definitely comment on that. I think Dana, amongst media minds in this chat room and listening and watching, I think Dana White gets it. I think that's an overused term, but I think he gets it. He understands the power of media. He lets everybody act as they're going to be, and if they're a bad actor, let people weed them out. If they're a good actor, let people, praise them. And he lets people work their shtick, because there's still a shtick in the UFC, just like there is in wrestling, and everybody has their way of selling tickets. I think what Dana has foreseen is essentially the UFC is a content creator and matchmaker, and that's what they are. It's a brand, and the UFC has the ability to say, we're going to ignore a lot of the politics and the BS that come along with some of these other organizations that feel they need to be buttoned up or be a certain way, and everybody has to fit a mold. I understand it's different because they're individual athletes, Jeremy, involved in this. And I get the team aspect. So there's a stark difference between what the Patriots do versus what the UFC does, and I think they have to behave that way. I think Dana's a visionary, and I think he has media on his mind all the time. That's why he's doing things like, Fuck It Friday. I don't know if I could swear on this. Fuck It Friday.
Yes,
and he's doing those types of things. So he gets, the idea of media and putting content out there that's compelling and what people want to watch. The problem the UFC runs into is only that there's so many other leagues that they compete with, even though they're a cut above everybody else. You'd love to see everybody always fight the best, just like we wanted to see Kayla and Amanda, now potentially Kayla Harrison from PFL, and hopefully Juliana Pena in that bantamweight fight as time goes on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what you talked about, and it is with the individuals that make up, the UFC. In a bigger scale, I mean, that is technically, and it's different from the UFC, since the NFL or the NBA, in terms of you do have teams and you have individual team owners and all that. But at its core, it is still a larger group of individuals that come together to make teams, and the teams come together. And so it's just, I just look back, like if you look at someone like Adam Silver, and then you look at someone like Dana White, you're like, one of these men is a leader, and one of these men is pathetic beta who can't even stand up to any of these players. You know what I mean? So
I'll ask all you guys. I think it's no question that the UFC has surpassed the NHL in the major sports arena. I feel so. So I think he's making, Jeremy, to your point, huge gains and huge strides because of a lot of his stances and because of a lot of the line he's drawn, so to speak, in the sand.
Yeah.
It's such a tough comparison because it's completely different business models. The NHL has 82 games, whereas, you've kind of got a UFC event every weekend, but you've got the smaller fight nights, things like that. And then you have, once a month, you have pay-per-views. You have these $80, $90 pay-per-views, whatever they're costing now at this point. And so it is a different business model. But when you're talking about what gets talked about more, what draws more, I think definitely UFC is outpacing NHL